My parents kicked me out to give my room to my brother's wife. "You're a burden anyway," they said as she dumped my clothes on the street. I left without a fight, just smiled. My name is Mario, and I'm the unsung hero of my family's small business. At 23, I've been the backbone of their restaurant for years, handling everything from inventory management to customer service, and even modernizing their outdated systems. My parents, Elena and Antonio, always took me for granted, and my older brother Giovanni, well, he's always been the golden child, never having to do anything beyond his own little world. I didn't mind at first. I loved helping my family, thinking they'd eventually appreciate what I did for them. But deep down, I knew I was the one keeping everything afloat. They always bragged about my contributions when it was convenient, but the praise never lasted long. Despite everything I'd done, I was always the background player in their lives. They didn't care about the late nights I spent working at the restaurant or the sacrifices I made to make their business thrive. I was the quiet one, doing everything, but getting nothing in return. Then, one day, my brother got married. Suddenly, it wasn't enough. I was a burden. They needed my room for his new wife, and the rest of it, well, that was when I learned the true cost of being a good son. The moment I came home to find my room being emptied out into garbage bags, I was in shock. It wasn't just the mess or the way Ellen, my brother's new wife, was carelessly tossing my things into bags like they were nothing. It was the betrayal. My parents stood there, as if this was some casual, everyday thing. My mother, Elena, barely acknowledged my arrival, her eyes fixed on her phone as if she didn't care about the monumental shift they were causing in my life. "We told you, Mario," my father, Antonio, said, his voice thick with that usual condescending tone he always had for me. "It's time you moved out. You're becoming a burden." Burden? The word hit harder than I expected, leaving me gasping for air. I had spent years working double shifts at the family restaurant, managing their books, fixing their outdated systems, doing the dirty work they refused to acknowledge. And this was how they repaid me, by kicking me out without a second thought, all for their new daughter-in-law, Ellen. I'd known she'd been making comments about the room, but I never thought they'd actually go through with it. Yet, here I was, watching my things being carelessly tossed aside. "This is unbelievable," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, still struggling to understand. They didn't even care that I was standing there, heartbroken. Ellen, the woman they barely knew, was more important than their own son. The betrayal was suffocating. This was supposed to be my home. It wasn't just about the room, it was about everything. I had always been there for them. I had sacrificed my time, my energy, and my future for their business, and this was how they saw me. A burden. Suddenly, everything I had done for them felt like it meant nothing. The betrayal felt like a cruel slap in the face. I could feel the anger rising in me, a tidal wave of frustration that had been building for years but had finally found its release. I had worked tirelessly for my family, not just out of love, but out of a sense of duty and respect. But that moment, standing there watching them pack my life into garbage bags, my personal belongings treated like worthless scraps, made everything clear. This wasn't just about a room. It was about the years I had spent living in their shadows, always doing for them, and never once being appreciated. I wanted to scream, to yell at them for taking everything I'd done for granted. I wanted to let my brother, Carlos, know that I was the one who kept things running in their business, making it thrive while he sat on his high horse. But there was something far more potent than anger pulsing through me now, clarity. They didn't deserve another ounce of my effort. They thought they could break me, but this was the wake-up call I needed. I didn't have to beg for respect. I had earned it. That evening, after leaving their house without another word, I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The thought of leaving without a fight was initially painful, but now it felt like freedom. I wasn't their punching bag. I wasn't their ATM. I wasn't their problem to fix. I was done. It was the most liberating feeling in the world. I wasn't about to chase after their approval anymore. The resentment I'd carried for so long began to melt away, replaced by an empowering certainty that my life would be better without them in it. I was finally free. The words, "You're a burden," hit me like a slap to the face. I stood there, frozen, as my mother and brother exchanged casual glances. Ellen, the new wife, was already packing my things into garbage bags, not boxes, without a second thought. The nerve. It wasn't just the room they were taking from me, it was everything I had ever done for them. Every late night I'd worked at their shop, every customer I'd dealt with, every call I had answered for them, and for what? To be treated like this? As if all my efforts meant nothing. As if I was nothing. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as my father joined the chaos, fully backing up my brother and his wife. No one even considered the work I did, the way I'd built their business up, the hours I'd spent making sure their operation ran smoothly. Instead, I was the inconvenience. I was the one in the way of their perfect life, a life they built on my back. They never asked how my day had been. They never asked how I was doing. I was just an ATM. A means to an end. It was infuriating. What had I done wrong? Why was I being treated like the problem? The frustration gnawed at me. I had been nothing but loyal. I had put my family first, sacrificed my time, my energy, my sanity. And in return, I got a simple, "You're a burden," and my life thrown out onto the street. I couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't just about a room. It was about respect. It was about finally standing up for myself. And if they thought they could push me around like this, well, they had another thing coming. I didn't need them, and they needed me more than they realized. It was time to make them understand the cost of their actions. And they would pay it. I could feel the tension in the air as I packed my belongings. My room, my space, the one place I had always called my own, was being taken from me with no warning and no respect. The walls I had painted myself, the shelves I built with my own hands, everything was about to be turned over to Ellen, my brother's new wife, the one who had never once shown any gratitude. The fact that she had the audacity to tell me she'd take good care of my room was beyond insulting. But you know what? I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me snap. Instead, I stayed calm, methodical. I packed my things carefully, taking my time. I made sure everything that belonged to me, down to the smallest detail, was packed properly. The desk I installed, the gaming setup I'd put hours into, all of it was going with me. There was no way they were going to profit off the hard work I'd put into creating this space. I wasn't just leaving, I was taking my power back. Mackenzie, my best friend, had been my rock through all of this. She'd listened to my rants, supported me without question. When I told her what happened, she was furious, but I told her not to intervene. I didn't need to destroy them. They were already doing a fine job of that themselves. But what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for years. I wasn't just a burden to them, I was the backbone of their business. And now, I was about to make them realize just how much they needed me. I wasn't going to do anything illegal. They had handed me everything I needed to bring their whole empire down, legally. And they had no idea. 2 weeks had passed since I'd quietly packed my things and left my parents' house, and honestly, it felt like the calm before a storm. I knew they were still reeling, still processing what had happened. But me? I was thriving. My new job at Morrison's was going great, and the clients I had once worked with at my dad's place. They were flocking to me. Not because I badmouthed anyone, but because I was doing things right, offering better service, actually delivering on promises they couldn't keep. Then, the first wave of vindication hit. Mackenzie, who was still living next door, started sharing the gossip with me. Ellen was throwing a tantrum over the renovations. She was making demands that could only be described as extravagant: custom closets, marble countertops, an entire kitchen makeover. My mom, Rhonda, had been against it at first, but of course, Ellen's manipulation worked. She even used the grandchild card, claiming that this was the kind of home she wanted for their future family. The renovations spiraled out of control. Mackenzie had recorded Ellen screaming at my mom when she tried to suggest they save for a few months first. The idea that they didn't even have the basic sense to understand their financial situation made me laugh bitterly. Meanwhile, at my dad's business, things were falling apart. Clients were leaving. Mr. Rodriguez, their best customer, switched over to Morrison's after I helped him with a deal that would have taken weeks in my dad's hands. I knew I had delivered the final blow when my dad finally called, asking for help, his voice full of desperation, not pride. But I wasn't there to save him anymore. I wasn't the burden. I didn't need to fight, didn't need to shout. I simply walked away, and now, I was watching them drown in their own mistakes, and for the first time, I felt completely free. Vindication didn't come with a confrontation, it came with their downfall. Watching them crumble while I built my own life was the sweetest form of satisfaction. It was around 2 weeks after I left that the real chaos began. My parents tried to pretend nothing had changed, but they were beginning to feel the weight of their decisions. Ellen, of course, wasn't making it easier. She was pushing for bigger and more expensive renovations, demanding custom closets, imported tiles, and even a brand new backyard. I could hear the frustration in my mom's voice when she called me once, trying to manipulate me into coming back. The thing is, I knew exactly what was going on. They couldn't afford the things she was asking for, but my parents never bothered to learn the value of anything. They only understood one thing, money, and without me, they were floundering. Then, I started seeing the cracks in the business. My dad's place. A mess. Without me handling the logistics, the clients were slipping away. They didn't even know how to manage the basic systems I'd set up for them. Mr. Rodriguez, my dad's best customer, switched to Morrison's after I helped him with a difficult order that my dad would have taken weeks to figure out. The satisfaction of knowing I had actually helped these people in ways my family couldn't was intoxicating. I wasn't petty, I was just better at what I did. That, for once, felt like true justice. The tensions within my family grew. Carlos and Ellen were at each other's throats, Ellen complaining about the renovations not being perfect and Carlos, as always, siding with her. The irony was almost too much to handle. Carlos had lost his job, and Ellen was doing nothing but racking up debt. And my dad? He was spiraling, alone in his car at night, unable to fix the disaster that was his life. Meanwhile, I was living my best life. My new job, my independence, it was the freedom I had always wanted. And as they sunk deeper into their mess, I simply kept moving forward, leaving them to drown in the consequences of their choices. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came looking for me, but when the call finally came, the tension in my chest was almost unbearable. My father had left multiple voicemails, each more desperate than the last. He wasn't calling to apologize, no, he was calling to beg. I'd been anticipating this moment for weeks, but when it arrived, I felt a mix of anger, frustration, and an intense sense of justice. They had abandoned me without a second thought, tossing me out like trash. Now they needed me, and there was something deeply satisfying about knowing I was in control. The drama hit a fever pitch when they showed up at my apartment, my new space that they never thought I could afford. I let them stew for a moment as I stood at the door, keeping them outside. My mom was crying, desperate, her face a mess of worry. My father's typical bravado had crumbled, replaced with the pleading tone of a man who realized that he had screwed up. "We need your help," he said, his voice shaking. But there was no remorse, no genuine apology. Just the same old manipulation they always used when things didn't go their way. As they begged, I stayed calm, feeling the weight of the moment. This was the justice I had been waiting for. I wasn't going to offer them sympathy or give in to their pleas. Instead, I pulled out the paperwork, the confirmation of my purchase of the house. I smiled, watching the shock register on their faces. This was the moment when their world fell apart. They had no idea how deeply I had planned this. Every move, every calculation had led to this precise moment of suspense. I had waited for this. And now, as they realized I owned their home, the silence was deafening. It was perfect justice. As the days passed, it became clearer and clearer that the house was slowly sinking under the weight of their mistakes, and the irony was almost poetic. My parents, so proud of their lifestyle, had built their entire existence on the assumption that I would always be there to bail them out. I had always been the one holding things together, managing their finances, dealing with their suppliers, ensuring the business ran smoothly. They never acknowledged it, though. To them, I was just the spare son, the one who was always available to clean up their messes. Now, as the business fell apart, they were scrambling for help, and I couldn't help but watch the chaos unfold with a twisted satisfaction. My old clients, now loyal to me, had no issue switching sides, and they trusted me far more than my family ever did. I had simply treated them with respect, provided better service, and followed through on promises. Meanwhile, my parents had been overcharging for years, neglecting their relationships, and pretending everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. Not anymore. Every single client I took from them felt like a small victory, but when the news of their crumbling business started to spread, I felt a deep sense of vindication. They were now seeing the consequences of their actions, and none of them liked it. Dad had tried to call me multiple times, but I'd ignored each message. His desperation was palpable. He had nothing left to hold on to but his pride, and I wasn't going to let him use that to manipulate me again. The real blow came when their employees began to leave, one by one, as they realized the truth: my parents couldn't keep it together without me. It was like a slow-motion car crash, and I was enjoying every second. I wasn't heartless. I had learned over the years that sometimes the best way to help someone is to let them face the consequences of their choices. And I was done cleaning up their mess. For the first time in my life, I felt a powerful sense of freedom, a weight lifting off my shoulders that I didn't even realize had been there for so long. All those years of being the invisible support system, the one who was always expected to fix everything, suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. It was like stepping out of a shadow and into the sunlight, realizing how much I had sacrificed without ever receiving a fraction of the respect or acknowledgement I deserved. The empowerment I felt was indescribable. I had lived under the constant assumption that I was disposable, always there when they needed something but never truly valued for who I was. Now, I was free to make my own decisions without the suffocating expectations of my family hanging over me. The money I'd made from my business, my hard work, was no longer just a lifeline for their comfort. It was mine. For the first time, it was just mine, and the possibilities felt endless. I didn't have to chase their approval anymore. I didn't have to answer their calls or scramble to help them out of another jam they'd created. I was finally free of that cycle of manipulation, and the joy I felt in knowing that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. I could breathe. I could finally focus on myself, build my life the way I'd always dreamed of without guilt or resentment clouding my decisions. And when I saw them crumble, desperately trying to keep everything afloat without me, I felt a deep satisfaction. They were finally learning that there were consequences to the way they treated me. I had empowered myself, taken control of my destiny, and most importantly, I had stopped being anyone's safety net. It was my turn to thrive. Mario had expected his parents to reach out eventually. He'd even anticipated the guilt-laden pleas. But nothing could have prepared him for the reality of their desperation. It came in the form of a voicemail one evening as he sat in his modest apartment, scrolling through social media. His father's voice, ragged and filled with a mixture of frustration and guilt, echoed through his phone. "Mario, I don't know what to do. Please, we need your help. Your mother, she's falling apart without you." The words hit him like a slap in the face. He had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, it felt colder than he could have imagined. For years, he had been their scapegoat, the one they would drain without a second thought. They had put him in a box marked useful, only to throw him away when he stopped performing to their expectations. And now, when everything they had taken for granted crumbled beneath them, they came crawling back. The irony was overwhelming. The same parents who had belittled him for his unremarkable career, who had shown him no respect for his sacrifices, were now trying to remind him of their shared history. As he listened to his father's desperate words, a sharp, burning anger built inside him. How dare they? How dare they act like they hadn't been the ones to cast him aside, to treat him like an afterthought for all these years? The resentment that had slowly simmered inside of him over the years began to boil over. He had built his life on his own terms, without their support, and now they wanted to reclaim the power they'd once held over him. But this time, Mario wasn't going to be swayed. The emotional manipulation, the guilt trips, they wouldn't work. He had learned the hard way that people who are used to taking without giving will never understand what it means to stand on your own. The phone call ended, but Mario's mind kept replaying their words. I don't know what to do. Well, neither did they. And that was the beauty of it. For the first time, Mario could see them for who they truly were, manipulators who had lost their control. They had been holding him back for so long, and now he was free. He wouldn't go back to the family that had never really treated him like one. And if they wanted his help, they would have to learn to fend for themselves, just as he had. The months that followed were a blur of silent triumph for Mario. For the first time in his life, he wasn't tethered to his family's expectations, their manipulation, their constant demands. Every day, as he walked through the door of his modest apartment, the weight that had pressed down on him for so long lifted a little more. The constant dread that he might have to return to the chaos of their world was gone. Every morning, he woke up to a sense of freedom, the kind that only comes when you cut yourself off from toxic people. Then, one afternoon, as he sipped his coffee and scrolled through his emails, something caught his eye, an unexpected message from his mother. For a moment, he debated ignoring it, keeping his distance like he had since the day they cast him out. But something in him felt strangely compelled to read it. Mario, I know you're probably angry. But please, let's put the past behind us. Things have fallen apart here without you. We don't know how to manage anymore. Please come back home. A wave of relief washed over him as he read those words, but beneath it was something else, a quiet sense of victory. He had not only made it on his own, but he had also become the person they now realized they could never replace. No more would he be their safety net. He wasn't going to fall back into the old pattern, no matter how much they begged or how much they claimed to need him. He replied with a simple message, I'm doing fine. You'll be okay. And in that moment, as he clicked send, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, true peace.